They say revenge is a dish best served cold, but sometimes it's worth waiting 20 years for the perfect moment. If you're enjoying this story, please hit that like button and subscribe for more incredible tales of triumph. My name is Adrienne, and this is the story of how I learned that blood doesn't always make family, but success certainly changes everything. I was 12 when my father married Patricia, a woman who seemed charming enough during their courtship, but revealed her true nature the moment she moved into our Boston brownstone. My mother had passed away 3 years earlier from cancer, and Dad thought Patricia would be good for both of us. He couldn't have been more wrong. Patricia came with baggage in the form of her 17-year-old son, Marcus. While Dad was at work running his successful architectural firm, Patricia made it clear that I was an inconvenience in what she now considered her home. The subtle digs started immediately. "Adrienne, dear, you really should be more careful with your posture. A young lady should carry herself with dignity," she'd say, her voice dripping with false sweetness whenever Dad was around. But when he left for work, the mask came off. "You're just like your mother," she'd hiss while I was getting ready for school. "Always thinking you're better than everyone else. Well, let me tell you something, little girl. This is my house now, and you'll never be anything more than a reminder of what your father used to have." Marcus, meanwhile, was treated like a prince. Every achievement was celebrated, every failure excused. When he barely graduated high school, Patricia threw him a party. When I made honor roll consistently, she'd find something to criticize about my grades. The worst part wasn't the constant comparisons or the way she'd forget to make me dinner when Dad worked late. It was the systematic way she began erasing my mother's memory from the house. Photos disappeared, replaced with pictures of Patricia and Marcus. My mother's favorite vase vanished from the mantel. Her recipe box somehow got lost during spring cleaning. I learned to be invisible, to excel quietly, to never give her ammunition to use against me. But I was storing every slight, every cruel word, every moment of favoritism. I didn't know it then, but I was building something that would serve me well later in life, an unbreakable determination to prove them all wrong. The breaking point came during my senior year of high school. I had been accepted to Harvard with a partial scholarship, something that should have made any parent proud. I remember rushing home with the acceptance letter, practically floating with excitement. Dad was at a client meeting, so I shared the news with Patricia first. She read the letter with a blank expression, then looked at me with something that might have been disgust. "You know, Adrienne, you can play dress-up all you want, but you'll never really be part of this family. You don't deserve the Morrison name." Those words hit me like a physical blow. I stood there in our kitchen, the kitchen where my mother used to make pancakes on Sunday mornings, and felt something inside me break. But it wasn't my spirit that broke. It was my last connection to trying to please this woman. "You're right," I said quietly, my voice steady despite the tears threatening to fall. "I don't deserve your name. I deserve better." That night, I made a decision that would shape the rest of my life. I wasn't going to just succeed, despite Patricia's cruelty. I was going to succeed so completely, so thoroughly, that one day I'd be in a position to show her exactly what she'd underestimated. I started working part-time jobs immediately, determined to reduce my dependence on Dad's money. I knew Patricia resented every dollar spent on me, and I wasn't going to give her that power anymore. I babysat for neighbors, tutored younger students, and worked at the local library. Every dollar I earned went into a savings account that Patricia knew nothing about. Dad, bless him, never saw the full extent of Patricia's behavior. She was careful to maintain her facade around him, and I never wanted to put him in the position of choosing between us. He'd been through enough losing Mom, but I could see the strain it put on him, the way he'd sometimes look confused when Patricia would make offhand comments about me being difficult or ungrateful. Marcus, meanwhile, was coasting through community college, changing majors every semester while Patricia made excuses for his lack of direction. "He's just finding himself," she'd say. "Not everyone can be as single-minded as Adrienne." The way she said my name always made it sound like an insult. By the time I graduated high school, I had saved enough money to cover my remaining expenses at Harvard. I was 18, legally an adult, and ready to start building my own life. The night before I left for college, Patricia cornered me in the hallway. "Don't think this changes anything," she said, her voice low and venomous. "You can get all the fancy degrees you want, but you'll always be that scared little girl who lost her mommy. You'll never be good enough for this family." I looked at her for a long moment, this woman who had made my teenage years a living hell, and smiled. Watch me. Harvard was a revelation. For the first time in years, I was surrounded by people who judged me on my merits rather than my relationship to Patricia. I threw myself into my studies with a focus that impressed even my professors. I majored in business administration with a minor in finance, and I graduated summa cum laude. More importantly, I made connections. Real connections with people who would become lifelong friends and valuable business contacts. I learned that success wasn't just about working hard. It was about working smart and building relationships. During my sophomore year, I started a small tutoring business that grew into something much bigger. By senior year, I was managing a team of 20 tutors across 3 universities. It was my first real taste of entrepreneurship, and I loved every challenging moment of it. I went home for holidays and breaks, maintaining a cordial relationship with Patricia while secretly documenting everything. I watched as Marcus dropped out of his 3rd college attempt and moved back home. I listened as Patricia made excuses for his latest failure while simultaneously criticizing my success. "She's becoming too ambitious," I overheard her telling Dad during Thanksgiving of my junior year. "It's not natural for a young woman to be so focused on business. She should be thinking about settling down, starting a family." Dad defended me, of course, but I could see the doubt in his eyes. Patricia was subtle in her manipulations, planting seeds of concern that would grow over time. After graduation, I moved to New York City and landed a position at a prestigious investment firm. The work was demanding, but I thrived in the fast-paced environment. I was making good money, building my reputation, and slowly but surely climbing the corporate ladder. I kept in touch with Dad regularly, but my conversations with Patricia were limited to polite pleasantries during family gatherings. Marcus had found work at Dad's architectural firm, a job that Patricia had lobbied for relentlessly. I bit my tongue when she bragged about his natural talent and architectural eye. Years passed. I was promoted to senior analyst, then to vice president. I bought my own apartment in Manhattan, a beautiful 1-bedroom with a view of Central Park. I was successful, independent, and happy. But I never forgot Patricia's words or the way she'd made me feel like an outsider in my own home. When I turned 30, I decided it was time to make my move. I had been saving and investing aggressively for over a decade, and I had built a substantial portfolio. More importantly, I had learned everything I could about business acquisitions and corporate finance. I started researching Dad's company, Morrison Architecture. From the outside, it looked successful, but I knew how to read between the lines of financial statements. The firm was struggling. Dad was in his 60s, and the economic downturn had hit the architectural industry hard. Several long-term contracts had fallen through, and the company was carrying significant debt. I also knew, through careful observation during family visits, that Marcus was a liability. He was unreliable, frequently late, and his work quality was inconsistent. Dad kept him on out of loyalty to Patricia, but I could see the stress it was causing him. The opportunity I had been waiting for came when Dad mentioned during a phone call that he was considering retirement. "I'm getting too old for this, Adrienne," he said, his voice tired. "And honestly, I'm not sure what will happen to the firm. Marcus isn't ready to take over, and I don't have anyone else I trust." That's when I knew it was time. I flew to Boston the next weekend and took Dad to lunch at his favorite restaurant. Over lobster bisque and warm bread, I made him an offer he couldn't refuse. "I want to buy the firm," I said simply. Dad nearly choked on his soup. "What? Adrienne, honey, you work in finance. You don't know anything about architecture." "I know about business," I replied calmly. "And I know that Morrison Architecture is a good company with a strong reputation that's going through a rough patch. I also know that you're tired and ready to retire. I can give you a fair price, ensure the company survives, and take care of the employees. We talked for hours. I showed him my financial projections, my business plan, my vision for the company's future. I could see him warming to the idea, especially when I explained how I would modernize the firm's operations and expand into new markets. "What about Marcus?" he asked finally. "Patricia expects him to inherit the business." I looked my father in the eye and said the words I had been preparing for years. "Dad, with all due respect, Marcus isn't capable of running this company. You know it, I know it, and deep down, even Patricia knows it. But I am." It took several more meetings and a lot of negotiation, but eventually, Dad agreed to sell me the firm. The legal paperwork took months to complete, but finally, the day came when I officially became the owner of Morrison Architecture. I kept the news quiet initially, wanting to get a full understanding of the company's operations before making any major changes. I spent 2 weeks in the Boston office, working alongside the employees, learning the business from the ground up. That's when I discovered just how much of a problem Marcus had become. The evidence was overwhelming. Marcus had been showing up late consistently, missing important client meetings, and producing subpar work that other employees had to fix. I found invoices for lunches he'd charged to the company, personal expenses he'd hidden in project budgets, and a trail of frustrated clients who had specifically requested not to work with him. Even worse, he had been using his position as the boss's future son-in-law to harass some of the younger female employees. Nothing actionable in a legal sense, but definitely creating a hostile work environment. I found documentation of complaints that had been filed with HR but never properly addressed. The final straw came when I discovered that Marcus had been telling clients he was the heir apparent to the firm and making promises about future projects that were completely unrealistic. He had essentially been running a shadow operation, undermining Dad's authority and damaging the company's reputation. I had seen enough. It was time to clean house. I called a staff meeting for the following Monday morning. I wanted to address the entire team before word got out about the ownership change. When I walked into the conference room, I could see the confusion on everyone's faces. They knew me as the boss's daughter, but they weren't sure why I was suddenly taking charge. "Good morning, everyone," I began, my voice steady and professional. "I have some important news to share. As of last Friday, I am the new owner of Morrison Architecture." The room erupted in surprised murmurs. I could see Marcus in the back, his face pale with shock. He clearly hadn't seen this coming. "I know this is unexpected," I continued, "but I want to assure you all that my primary concern is the health and success of this company. Over the past 2 weeks, I've been evaluating our operations, and I've identified several areas where we need to make immediate improvements." I spent the next hour outlining my vision for the company's future. I talked about new technology we would implement, expanded services we would offer, and the professional development opportunities I would provide for the staff. I could see the excitement building in the room. These were talented people who had been frustrated by the company's stagnation. "However," I said, my voice becoming more serious, "I also need to address some personnel issues. Effective immediately, Marcus Patterson is no longer employed by Morrison Architecture." The silence that followed was deafening. Marcus shot to his feet, his face red with anger and embarrassment. "You can't do this," he shouted. "This is supposed to be my company. Patricia promised me." "Patricia promised you nothing," I interrupted calmly. "She doesn't own this company, I do. And I'm making a business decision based on documented performance issues and professional misconduct." I had prepared for this moment. I had copies of every complaint, every missed deadline, every client who had expressed dissatisfaction with his work. I was ready for a fight, but Marcus seemed to deflate as the reality of the situation hit him. "Security will escort you out," I continued. "Your personal belongings will be packed and sent to you. Your final paycheck will include 2 weeks' severance, which is more generous than you deserve." As Marcus was led out of the building, I could see a mixture of relief and admiration on my employees' faces. They had been dealing with his incompetence and inappropriate behavior for years, and now they were finally free of it. But I knew the real confrontation was yet to come. That evening, I drove to Dad's house for what I knew would be an explosive family dinner. I arrived to find Dad in his study, looking older than I had ever seen him. Patricia was in the kitchen, and I could hear her voice raised in anger, though I couldn't make out the words. "Adrian," Dad said when he saw me, "we need to talk." "I know," I replied. "Is Patricia ready to discuss this like adults?" He gave me a look that suggested he wasn't sure Patricia would ever be ready for that, but he led me to the kitchen anyway. Patricia was waiting for me, her face a mask of fury. "How dare you?" she hissed, before I had even fully entered the room. "How dare you humiliate my son like that? He's family." "No," I said quietly. "He's your son. There's a difference." "You vindictive little—" "That's enough," Dad interjected, his voice firm. "Both of you, sit down. We're going to discuss this civilly." But Patricia was beyond civil discussion. 20 years of resentment and control were pouring out of her in a torrent of accusations and insults. She called me ungrateful, manipulative, and cruel. She said I had stolen Marcus's birthright and destroyed his future. I sat there and listened to every word, my expression calm and professional. When she finally ran out of steam, I spoke. "Are you finished?" I asked politely. "Finished. I'm just getting started. You think you've won something here, but you haven't. You'll never be able to run that company. You'll fail, and when you do, don't come crying to this family for help." I stood up slowly, smoothing down my skirt. "You're right about one thing, Patricia. I have won something here. I've won the right to prove that everything you said about me was wrong." I turned to Dad. "The company is in good hands. I'll take care of your employees, honor your legacy, and build something you can be proud of." Then I looked back at Patricia. "And as for not deserving the family name, you were right. I don't deserve it. I've earned something better. I've earned my own name, my own success, and my own respect." I headed toward the door, but Patricia's voice stopped me. "You'll regret this," she called after me. "Mark my words, Adrian. You'll regret this." I turned back one final time, and for the first time in 20 years, I saw something I had never seen before. Fear. Patricia was afraid. Afraid that I might actually succeed where Marcus had failed. Afraid that her golden boy might not be as special as she had always claimed. Afraid that the scared little girl she had tormented for years had grown into a woman who was everything she had said I could never be. "The only thing I regret," I said, "is that it took me this long to stop caring what you think." 6 months later, Morrison Architecture was thriving. I had implemented new project management software that streamlined our operations and improved client communication. I had hired 2 talented young architects who brought fresh perspectives and energy to the team. Most importantly, I had restored the company's reputation by delivering exceptional work on time and within budget. The transformation hadn't been easy. There were long nights and difficult conversations with clients who had been burned by Marcus's mistakes. There were financial challenges as I worked to pay down the company's debt while investing in its future. But every obstacle I overcame felt like a victory against the voice in my head that still sometimes whispered Patricia's cruel words. I had also made some changes to the company culture. I instituted regular team meetings where everyone could share ideas and concerns. I created a mentorship program for junior employees. I established clear policies about workplace behavior and made sure everyone understood that harassment and discrimination would not be tolerated. The results spoke for themselves. Employee satisfaction was at an all-time high, and we had landed several major contracts that would keep us busy for the next 2 years. More importantly, we were building a reputation as a company that valued both excellence and integrity. Dad visited the office regularly, and I could see the pride in his eyes as he watched me lead the team he had built. He had initially worried about selling to me, concerned that I might change too much too quickly. But he could see that I respected his legacy while also moving the company forward. "Your mother would be so proud," he told me one afternoon as we reviewed the quarterly reports. "She always said you had her determination and my business sense. I should have listened to her." It was the first time he had acknowledged that there might have been problems in our household, and I appreciated his honesty. We were building a new relationship, one based on mutual respect and shared goals, rather than the complicated family dynamics of my youth. The real test came when Patricia and Marcus showed up at the office unannounced on a busy Tuesday morning. I was in the middle of a client presentation when my assistant informed me that they were in the lobby, demanding to see me. I finished my meeting, took a moment to compose myself, and went downstairs to find them waiting. Patricia looked older, more tired than I remembered. Marcus looked defeated, his usual arrogance replaced by something that might have been desperation. "Adrian," Patricia began, her voice lacking its usual venom. "We need to talk." "Do we?" I replied calmly. I wasn't aware we had anything to discuss. "Marcus has been having trouble finding work," she continued, ignoring my tone. "People in the industry are talking, saying he was fired for cause. It's affecting his reputation." "He was fired for cause," I said matter-of-factly. "Multiple causes, actually. Would you like me to enumerate them?" Marcus stepped forward, his face flushed with embarrassment. "Look, I know I could have done better, but I've learned from my mistakes. I've been taking courses, working on my skills. I just need a chance to prove myself." I studied him for a long moment. There was something different about him, something that might have been genuine humility. But I also remembered the harassment complaints, the missed deadlines, the clients who had been disappointed by his work. "What exactly are you asking for?" I asked. "A job," he said simply. "I'll start at the bottom, work my way up. I just need a chance." Patricia looked like she was about to say something, but I held up a hand to stop her. This was between Marcus and me. "You want to work for me?" I asked. "The same woman you spent years treating as less than family? The same woman your mother said didn't deserve the family name?" Marcus had the grace to look ashamed. "I know I was wrong. We were both wrong. I'm not asking for special treatment. I'm asking for a fair chance." I considered his request for a long moment. Part of me wanted to turn him away, to let him experience the same rejection I had felt for so many years. But another part of me, the part that had built this company into something Dad could be proud of, recognized that this was a test of the leader I had become. "I'll tell you what," I said finally. "I'll give you a chance, but not here. I know a firm in Chicago that's looking for junior architects. They specialize in residential projects, which might be a good fit for your skill set. I'll make a call, put in a good word. But Marcus, understand this. If you screw this up, if you use my recommendation to get this job and then fail to perform, I will make sure every architect in the country knows exactly what kind of employee you are." Marcus nodded eagerly. "I understand. Thank you. I won't let you down." "You won't let yourself down," I corrected. "This isn't about me anymore." As they prepared to leave, Patricia turned back to me. For a moment, I saw something I had never seen before. Genuine regret. "I was wrong about you," she said quietly. "I was wrong about a lot of things." "Yes," I agreed. "You were." She nodded, as if accepting a judgment she knew she deserved. "For what it's worth, I'm sorry." I looked at this woman who had made my teenage years so difficult, who had tried to convince me that I would never amount to anything, and I felt something I hadn't expected. Pity. She had spent so much energy trying to tear me down that she had missed watching me build myself up. "I believe you are," I said. "But Patricia, understand this. I didn't succeed to spite you. I succeeded because that's who I am. That's who I've always been. You just couldn't see it." After they left, I returned to my office and looked out the window at the Boston skyline. My company occupied 3 floors of a prestigious downtown building, and from my office, I could see the harbor where ships had brought ambitious people to this city for centuries. I thought about the scared 12-year-old girl who had watched her stepmother rearrange her life, the determined teenager who had saved every penny to reduce her dependence on family money, the driven young woman who had built a career in New York while never forgetting where she came from. That evening, I called Dad to tell him about Patricia and Marcus's visit. He listened without interrupting, and when I finished, he was quiet for a long moment. "You handled that well," he said finally. "Better than I would have. I had good examples. I replied. Mom taught me to be strong, and you taught me to be fair. You taught yourself to be successful, he said. That was all you. As I hung up the phone, I realized he was right. Every achievement, every promotion, every successful project had been the result of my own hard work and determination. Patricia's cruelty had motivated me initially, but it hadn't defined me. I had defined myself. I had proven that I didn't need to deserve the family name to earn my own respect. I had shown that success wasn't about birthright or favoritism, but about competence and character. Most importantly, I had learned that the best revenge isn't getting even. It's getting ahead. The scared little girl who had been told she didn't deserve the family name had grown into a woman who had built something far more valuable, a legacy of her own making. And that legacy would last long after the echoes of Patricia's cruel words had faded into memory. Morrison Architecture continued to thrive under my leadership, but more than that, it had become a place where talent was recognized, hard work was rewarded, and everyone truly deserved to be there. In the end, that was the greatest victory of all.